moving on, we have the Edmonton Oilers at 13th. And the Oilers are an exciting one because you have some really good ones and you have some really bad ones. And I think people are already like, those names are flying in people's heads of like who's really good and who's really bad. At the top, guess who? Our boy, future Toronto Maple Leaf.
There you said.
Comment down below.
I was waiting for it.
How many years left on his? 5 years left on his deal, everyone. That's the pay cut deal the superstar is finally going to take with the Toronto Maple Leafs. Connor McDavid at a $38.6 million surplus spread over 5 years. So according to Dom's model, you ready for how good Connor McDavid is?
Let's hear it.
He'd work out to about fair value at $20 million a year.
Just insane.
And again, it's like you see that number and you like burst out laughing, like, no, that's ridiculous. But then it's like, wait a minute, how many points did he get last year? And then if you cut that in half, how many points would that player get? And then it's the benefit of getting it from one guy. And then again, what we said before about how when McDavid's on the ice, the puck is always in the offensive end. So he is probably the best quote unquote defensive player in the NHL. So again, like when you see it like that, it makes sense, right? But Connor McDavid, man, that friggin' good.
That dude's an alien. We've talked ad nauseum how good Connor McDavid is, but yeah, when you actually look at it on paper and you look at a model like Dom's and you see the value in Connor McDavid and how making $12.5 million a year, he's being underpaid by nearly $8 million a season.
Crazy.
Like, again, according to one model, this is not the be all and end all, but it really puts things in perspective and shows you how good a player actually is and how much value they're actually providing at their current salary.
Yeah, no, it's just, and again, like people talk about the eye test. Well, McDavid passes the eye test in flying colors.
Passes every test.
Yeah.
Flying colors.
Crazy. Moving down the good deals, not shocking, Draisaitl. I assume this would be like one of the best ones in the league, and I'll raise my hand as like one of the people who, when like Draisaitl got that deal, I was like, that's horrible. Like that's a way overpay.
Oh yeah, you're not alone, Lepore. There's a lot of people.
Oh, I mean that deal got people. A lot of people thought that was a deal that was going to kind of ruin the NHL. Because like if Draisaitl got 8, like what are other guys going to get? And then now it's like every team in the NHL would take Draisaitl at $8 million. Like that's a joke.
Yeah, like Peter Chiarelli made a lot of shitty decisions as GM of the Edmonton Oilers, but signing Leon Draisaitl to that contract, got to give him credit there. That was an unbelievable decision by the Oilers at the time.
Good point. I've never kind of went in the mental direction to give Chiarelli credit for that one. But yeah, he has him at about a $23 million surplus over the 4 years, and fair value around $14 million a year, which again, like with the best players in the league, like no one's making that kind of money now, but if they're an open market now, what they would get, contribution, it makes sense. This one, the next one, lots of discussion to be had with this one. Zach Hyman, somewhat shocking, I thought. And I think we'll both agree here that like nobody has a problem, or I'm sure very few people have a problem with Hyman's AAV. It's the term and what Zach Hyman is going to look like 3, 4, 5 years from now. But he has him at just under a $13 million surplus. It's fun. I just like looked at it and was shocked. Over the 7 years of his deal, I just got reminded that he was given a 7-year deal, and he is Hyman about fair value around $7 million a year. So,
which I think is an overpayment. That this is the one thing, one of the main things I disagree with in the model. And Dom wrote in the article, like he specified, he's like, listen, like when you compare Zach Hyman, because if you follow him on Twitter, when guys sign contracts, you know, not just him, but some of the other analytics guys, they'll come up with comparables and they'll show like 5 or 6 different guys from the past, not necessarily like one of Hyman's contemporaries, but even going back like 10 years from now, showing like similar players and how they aged. And he says that when you look at the comps, that this Hyman contract probably isn't going to age well, but based on the model, it looks like it's a good contract. And I get it. Like, you know, we've talked about this on previous shows, like Zach Hyman, the last 3 years has been really good. He's third on the Leaf. He was third on the Leafs in goals per game. Like, this is a guy that has proven that he can play with the top guys and be successful with the top guys on your roster. But it's like you said, Lepore, you go 3, 4, 5 years down the road looking at a player that doesn't skate well, that doesn't have high-end offensive talent, right? So yeah, to be paying him $5.5 million, it's fine for the first couple of years. And yes, I think he's going to have a good season playing with McDavid and Draisaitl, but down the line, man, I don't see that as a good contract at all.
Like, I was shocked and I wasn't. Like, I was shocked to see it in the green. But again, like, based on the AV, I'm like, okay, that's kind of fair. But then I wasn't shocked because, like, I know, like, all the underlying numbers guys love Hyman. Like, he, like, every line he's played on does well, and he makes players better, and like, he's good defensively, quote unquote. So like, that on that end, I wasn't shocked, but I'm with you. Like, no, like, everyone's shaking their head on that deal. But let's move on to the red ones for the Edmonton Oilers. None of these are shocking. None of these are shocking. Right off the bat, Zach Kassian, $8.4 million surplus over the next 3 years. That works out to what? Like, my quick math here, like a $2.8 million surplus divided over the length of that contract. According to Dom's model, Zach Kassian doesn't deserve league minimum.
Yeah, he's
if I'm doing my math or around there. So like, not really surprising, but I know he had a few players like that who, like, and again, people would say like, oh, this player, that player's worth that, but it's about wins above replacement. So I'm somewhat guessing here, but I assume what the model means is like, okay, well, if I have an average NHL lineup out there and that average NHL lineup plays the entire 60 minutes, and then I remove one of those average players and insert Zach Kassian, his WAR is in the negative. So like, my chances of winning go down. So it's like, that's why like that had this like negative, like the negative numbers come into play, like in this model. So like, that's like his point here, where it's like, this guy on the ice, like, lowers your chances to win, like, based on like what should be out there as like average NHL talent. Right.
Yeah, there's nothing to disagree with there with Zach Kassian. Like, even just based on the eye test, like, that dude just isn't a good player.
Yeah, there was one game against the Leafs, like 2 or 3 point blank scoring chances, and like missed all 3. I think even like 2 of them were passes from McDavid.
And that's the thing, like, he's gotten so many opportunities to play with him. Even at the beginning of this season, he was on the first line with Connor McDavid. Crazy. Like, if you're having trouble producing with Connor fucking McDavid, then I'm sorry, but you're just not a very good player.
Yeah. Other ones, again, we'll fly through them. Cody Ceci, not shocking. He has him at about a $5.5 million surplus over the 4 years of his deal. He has him at about I think like a $1.5 to $2 million player at fair value for Ceci, which, I mean, as much as we shit on Ceci, it's like, if he's like a 5'6" defenseman making 1.5 or 2 million, like,
yeah, that's like, fine.
That's fine. Exactly. And again, like, how the model, you see it and like, yeah, that makes sense. Like, the problem with the Leafs that we were paying him 4.5. So it's like, yeah, you can't, like, it's way too much money. Duncan Keith, he has him at a $13.2 million surplus. He is Keith low, man. Like, he thinks Keith is like, at this point in his career, like a bad NHL player.
Yeah, like basically like below replacement level player.
Yeah, like really bad. And like, we're all cheering for Duncan Keith. Like, I friggin' love Duncan Keith. Like, watching him with those Chicago teams when they were winning, like, he was incredible. But man, it's rough to see. And then the next one, Bruno's favorite player, Darnell Nurse, a $41 million surplus. He has Nurse, again, quick math, at about a $4 million player in terms of value. So
making $9.25 million a season.
Yeah, like,
now.
think of that, man. Like, for that term, like, and again, like, argue the model, whatever, but like, if every player's treated the same, and we're seeing a lot of these deals, and what he's saying like kind of makes sense, that guy's making more than double long term at that amount than what he deserves. Horrible, man.
And again, like, before Oilers fans freak out on us, like, we completely understand how good Darnell Nurse is. Like, I think he's a really good player. He brings a lot to the table. Last year, he had a breakout season, scored a ton of goals, provides physicality. He's solid defensively, but why are you paying him $9.25 million? Why give him that extension? Like, it's like, we get it. He's a really good player, but to pay a guy, that much money who's not an elite defenseman in the league, and maybe you disagree with me. Maybe you think Darnell Nurse is an elite defenseman. Maybe you think he's in the same category as Adam Fox and Victor Hedman and Cale Makar and guys like that. But I just don't think he is.
Yeah.
So that contract, I don't think is going to look very well down the road.
I don't know what other way to put it, but like, he does a lot of things, but he's not as tight as those guys are. I think people know what I mean. Like when you watch him, like you mentioned, like the Prongers before, and those guys, like when you watch him, like Lidstrom was like the model for this, where it's like no mistakes, solid every time. And like Nurse is more volatile, in my opinion, anyway. And which doesn't mean he's not a great player. It's just that like that type of money is like A+ defenseman money. And I just don't have him in that category. And apparently neither does Dom Luszczyszyn. That's pretty well a wrap with the Edmonton Oilers, but he actually, and this is kind of a talking point too, really quickly, he had Tyson Barrie like a pretty decent deal. So I mean, he scores, and again, like we talked about how like Dom loves the guys who get the puck at the other end. So I mean, we can debate all day about that one, but again, good for Tyson Barrie. He knows how to pick.
I have no problem with Tyson Barrie's contract.
Yeah,
like that's the one, and I know I ripped into the Oilers on the last episode, but yeah, the Tyson Barrie contract specifically, like I have no problem with $4.5 million for Tyson Barrie.
Mm-hmm.
He's a really good offensive defenseman. Obviously, like you said, has his defensive deficiencies, but you're not overpaying the guy, right? You're giving him what he deserves essentially, and like Dom is saying, he deserves even more than $4.5 million a season. So
yeah,
I think that's a solid contract for Edmonton.
There you go. And again, like relatively speaking, like you see what defensemen get in the league. This guy produces, like if he's your number 4 or something, it's like, yeah, it's not bad. Like it's like comparing, and he does the power play, all that stuff. So